Welcome back, Renegade. I'm your host, Radar, and I am super excited that you are here with me today. So, I gotta ask you, do you know what the most valuable resource in the world is? And if you had a ton of it, would you know how to spend it effectively? But on another note, do you ever feel like you're working really, really hard every day? You're putting in a ton of effort, but you feel like you're just not making progress, that you're not making any forward momentum? Or do you ever feel like that work is just so exhausting because you're constantly putting out fires every day that by the time you get home, all you have energy to do is mindlessly scroll social media or rewatch the same TV shows over and over and over again? We're going to be diving into these concepts and how we can employ a strategic tool to boost our productivity, focus on what truly matters, and make strategic decisions about how to employ the most valuable resource in the world. Stay tuned. And we're going to build on them even further by exploring the and maximize the most valuable resource in the world. So, how do we define these? What's the difference between urgent and important? We also see that these tasks are the key to lasting success, happiness, and ultimate fulfillment. Welcome to the Renegade Institute. So, as kind of a quick recap of the last 2 weeks, we've been doing our initiative series with our first episode focusing on how should we be understanding initiative in our minds and how we should be looking at life as a game of chess against randomness and unpredictability that are trying to take the initiative from us, forcing us onto the back foot. And our job is to push back and retake initiative from life. Then last week, we built on this even further by looking at the difference between reactive life habits and proactive life habits and how we can use proactivity to try and reclaim that initiative on life by employing 3 strategic tools: redundancy, planning, and time management, so that we can set the conditions for our own success rather than life forcing us to live in a reactive way. So, this week, we're going to take those ideas and we're going to build on them even further by exploring the urgent versus important time matrix and how we can use it to categorize our tasks, to understand where we're putting our efforts, and maximize the most valuable resource in the world: our time. So, where did this matrix come from? What's the history of it? So, it actually was originally first coined by Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th president of the United States, who is quoted as saying that he often has 2 kinds of tasks: urgent ones and important ones. And he made that there was often a distinction between these 2 ideas. It was then later popularized by the author Stephen Covey in the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, a book that we'll be reviewing in a later episode. And so from this, now we have this tool, this urgent important matrix. So how do we define these? What's the difference between urgent and important? Urgent is defined as a state or situation requiring immediate action or attention.
Come on, Evie, faster.
Patience is a virtue.
Not right now, it isn't.
And so this is seen as a time-sensitive, attention-grabbing tasks that have clear consequences if neglected. And then important is defined as of great significance or value, likely having a profound effect on our success, our survival, or our well-being. And this is seen as things that truly matter in the long term or in the grand scheme of things. These are things that align with our long-term goals, our personal values, and strategic objectives that we have. And we also see that these important tasks are the key to lasting success, happiness, and ultimate fulfillment. And so this chart, this urgent versus important matrix, what does it look like? So here you can see that this chart, it's got 4 quadrants. And on the y-axis, we are determining whether the item or the task that we're doing is either important or non-important. And then on the x-axis, we break it up as to whether these tasks are urgent or non-urgent. This then creates 4 distinct quadrants in our chart. We have our non-urgent, non-important distractions. Those are going to be in quadrant 4. Our urgent, non-important interruptions of quadrant 3, our non-urgent important goals and planning of quadrant 2, and lastly on quadrant 1, that's going to be our urgent and important crises. So let's dig into it. We're going to break down each one of those specifically. So distractions, the not important, not urgent, quadrant 4. What do those look like? And so examples that we can see in our daily lives of these types of activities, it's going to be doomsday scrolling social media. That's going to be browsing aimlessly. We're not looking for anything. We're not really learning for anything. We're just kind of scrolling to fill in time. Or excessive gaming, games like Candy Crush that really provide little value to us. Or endlessly watching or rewatching movies and television shows that we've already seen before. This can also look like unnecessary shopping, where we're looking or perusing for things that we don't really have an intention to buy or need, or like retail therapy without any real intention of going through with it. These are going to be mindless activities. This is like mental junk food, right? That provide little long-term value to us.
So you're mining stuff to craft with and crafting stuff to mine with?
Uh-huh.
Did your dad write this game?
Mean.
And so how should we be framing these kinds of activities, the things that are going to be in this quadrant? And that's going to be generally, these are time wasting or time filling activities. They're things we do to get a minimal stimulation. It requires minimal effort on our part or hard work. And we're just filling in time. They don't have any real significant consequence if we don't complete them. They're not meaningfully contributing to our goals or well-being. And they're distractions, those time-filling activities that aren't meaningfully adding to our life, and it lacks productivity and long-term fulfillment. And when we find that we're doing these activities often, this can be symptomatic of us being avoidant or using a conflict avoidance strategy with the things that are going on in our life. But we'll be getting down into that a little bit more later on in the episode. So in our next quadrant, we got quadrant 3. That's going to be our urgent but not important interruptions. And so what are examples of these kinds of activities? This is going to be like routine correspondence and administrative tasks. This is like scrolling through emails that really don't pertain to us. And generally we read the header, read a little bit of the body, and then just drag and drop it into the trash because it doesn't really pertain to us. Or unnecessary meetings that we're sitting in on, but we're not contributing anything meaningful to them, and they don't really impact the work that we're doing. Or this can be represented by interruptions from others. These are also tasks that are the results of being overly reactive. So in last week's episode, we talked about certain reactive tasks like not putting gas in the car or not replacing the toilet paper until it's too late. And so these are those kinds of tasks, things that they're urgent because oh my gosh, we need gas, or yeah, we definitely need toilet paper right now, but they're not necessarily important. They're not really contributing towards our long-term success, our long-term fulfillment. This can also look like other people's emergencies and crises. So things from other people's quadrant 1 spilling over onto us.
The beacons are minute city! The beacons are lit!
Gun knuckles for 8.
And Rohan will answer.
So someone else is like, oh my gosh, I have something that I gotta do. Or this can look like someone stranded on the side of the road with a flat tire, right? So that's a crisis for them, but not necessarily for us. Or a colleague asking for help completing a project by an important deadline, or a friend asking us for a solid. That's these kinds of tasks. And how we should be thinking about them in our mind is that these are time-draining tasks that are interruptions. They're disrupting our daily focus. They're taking us away from the things that we want to be doing that are important for us and our well-being and our success in life. And then one of the biggest challenges about things from this task is that they can really easily be mistaken as important because of their urgent nature, because they have a deadline, because there are significant consequences if they are not completed quickly. We often mistake them as important, and so we prioritize them over actually completing important things like clearing out our emails, going to these meetings. It doesn't it's not actually important. It lacks contribution to our long term goals, our personal values, or our priorities. And so, if we're spending a lot of time in this quadrant, if we're doing a lot of these interruption type tasks, that can be symptomatic of us being overly accommodating, using an accommodating conflict strategy and not setting appropriate boundaries with ourselves and with our coworkers, our friends, our family, and the people around us.
Hey, Rick. I was wondering if you could help me out with a bit of a rake situation.
A rake situation?
I think he has my rake, and I'm not going to murder Gene.
Jerry, thank you for bringing me into the rake situation. I've done all I can. I'm out.
No surprise there.
I know we're jumping a little bit out of order here. We're going to quadrant 1. That's going to be our important, urgent tasks. Now, here's the thing that's a little tricky about this one is everyone thinks that this is the most important. This is where we should be spending all of our time. This is going to look like crisis management, right? Like if you have a pipe that explodes in your basement and it's spraying water everywhere, that's one of these things. That is an important, urgent task, right? Like our house is in danger. There's going to be huge consequences if we don't deal with it right in that moment. Nothing else in the world matters until this issue is resolved. It can also look like urgent customer complaints if a product has a technical failure or critical systems failure. This can also look like deadline-driven projects. So like a final. A final is going to take precedent over everything. And if it's 2 days before a final, that's an important, urgent thing that we need to be focusing on. And then this can also look like personal medical emergencies. Like if you're having a heart attack or your appendix is exploding, like that's an important, urgent thing. Like again, nothing else matters until this thing is resolved. And then car accidents, sick kids, all same. And so how should we be framing these kinds of tasks in our life? Where should we be prioritizing them in our time management? And these urgent and important tasks, they are necessary. They need to be made a priority, right? They require immediate attention. They're critical to achieving our long-term goals or deadlines, and there are serious consequences if there's inaction or that we don't put a focus on it right now. And it's also that these activities play a role in the long-term success or well-being of what we want to do in life. However, here's the tricky bit though, right? These are often, though, the byproduct of being too reactive. Just like we saw in the last episode with Tom and how he was going from crisis to crisis to crisis because he wasn't spending enough time being proactive. He wasn't spending enough time in quadrant 2, setting goals, planning, doing preventative maintenance. And so if you're spending all your time in quadrant 1 with crises, like these should be rare. This should be an infrequent occurrence. And if this is happening all the time, there might be a problem going on and we might need to reevaluate that. But again, we're going to hit that a little later on in the episode. And then finally, our last quadrant, the best one that we really want to be spending all of our time in, that's going to be our important but not urgent goals and planning. So what do these activities look like? These are the best bang for the buck activities that we can be doing. This is our goal setting. This is our strategic planning where we're sitting down, we're setting our long-term personal and professional financial goals, such as career planning, mapping out our financial future, using time for innovation or brainstorming ideas and coming up with idea generation. This is also personal development time, right? So this is where working out, exercising, doing cardio, keeping our physical fitness up to par is going to fall into this. This is also going to be furthering our education, going to undergrad, graduate school, vocational training, language training, or learning new skills and expanding our capabilities. This is also where we're going to see relationship building and mental health. Right? And these are the things that like spending quality time with family and friends. That is super important to us, but it's not urgent. It's not something we need to do right now. If I skip my workout this morning, 5 years from now, it's not going to make a huge difference. If I skip hanging out with my friend or connecting with my children, it's not going to make a huge difference in the long run, but it's something that we constantly need to do. We need to be building in that time for self-care, personal hobbies, time with our children. And this is also where we see that preventative maintenance, that stuff that Tom was really struggling with in last episode. Things like oil changes, home repair, long-term investments. That's what we're going to see. And so in this quadrant 2, how should we be framing these kinds of activities? And this is where we need to be spending the majority of our time. This is where we're going to be the most productive, and it's going to provide the most fulfillment throughout our life. These tasks are important because they're going to align with our long-term objectives, our personal values, and our professional goals, but they don't have a definitive deadline. They're not something that needs to be done right in this moment. And that often means that they can be pushed back or wrongly deprioritized to accommodate less important but more urgent tasks that are demanding our attention. And so this time needs to be protected. It needs to be intentionally built into our schedule, because if we just leave it to be ad hoc, oh, we'll get around to that when we have time, you're always going to find something. There's always going to be something that seems more urgent, more pressing, that's going to encourage us to try and deprioritize these activities. And that's something we really need to look back on. And so now we're going to jump into kind of like the so what. What do these mean to you? How can we use this tool to really understand where we're prioritizing our time? If we use this tool correctly, we can use it as a really good gauge to get a sense of where we're at. And the way that I like to use it is get a calendar, like an hourly calendar for either a week or a day, get 4 different highlighters and assign a color to each one of the quadrants. And then for that hour, just highlight where you were the most. Were you being in quadrant 1? Were you in quadrant 3? And what was going on at that time? And then look at the end and see, is there one color that seems to be dominating your schedule more often than the others? And is it the color that we really want to be engaging with or being intentional about? And so if we find that we're predominantly in the distractions quadrant, this is the one that we made red for us. This is going to be indicative of we are wasting time. Right? We're not being intentional, we're being mindless, and we need to kind of renew our focus. And this can also be indicative of maybe we're just really burnt out. Maybe we're looking for an escape. And what this can mean, if we're spending so much time in this quadrant, is that we need to figure out how to reduce the amount of stress that we're feeling every day in our lives. Maybe we need to change our jobs. Maybe we need to move things around in our situations to reduce the amount of stress that we're having so we're not stuck in this quadrant so often. This can also be indicative of having a lack of a clear purpose or why or motivation. Like maybe we don't know what we're working towards. Maybe we don't know what we want to be when we grow up. Maybe we just haven't really figured life out. If we're spending a ton of time in the distraction quadrant, that can be a huge indicator of like, we don't have a why. We don't know what we're working towards, and we need to take time to kind of figure that out and do some self-exploration. And where this quadrant can be okay if used correctly and used intentionally is when you're using it as active recovery to blow off steam, but only in small doses and after we spent a good amount of time in one of the other quadrants. And like what that looks like is with working out, right? You can't lift the heaviest weight. You can't do a 1-rep max for every single set, every single time, every single day without burning yourself out. Like you have to build in time for active recovery.
4002.
Mr. Burgundy,
1003.
Helen said that you needed to see me.
I don't know if you heard me counting. I did over 1,000.
And that's what these distractions serve as when we're doing it correctly. We need to treat it like dessert, where it's okay to do it every once in a while, and you're doing it as a form of active recovery. But when we're doing it all the time, just like eating dessert or junk food all the time, it can be really unhealthy for us. And so this is going to bring us to our other quadrant. That's going to be quadrant 3. That's our interruptions quadrant. And if we're spending too much time in the interruptions quadrant, this can be indicative of a couple of different things. The first of which is that maybe we're just living in a way that's too reactive, right? We're not adequately preparing for the things in our life, and we're not being proactive enough. But one of the other indicators that this can really show that can be a big challenge, and I know I've struggled with this myself, is that we're being too accommodating with others. We're being people pleasers, that we are deprioritizing the things that are important to us that we want to work on in order to try and maintain the relationship and standings with the people around us. And so what we need to do if we're spending too much time being in this quadrant is we need to evaluate the actual urgency of the requests that are being put on us. And we need to make sure we're only engaging in this quadrant when we've done our other important tasks and we have our free time to be able to do this. So like one of the things that I used to do all the time is as soon as I got into work, I would start answering emails, right? And moving emails from my inbox to my trash. And like a lot of times these are not terribly important, right? If it was an important thing, they probably just call you. And if it's an email, it's probably not super urgent or important. And so what we need to do is we need to set appropriate boundaries with ourselves, and we need to respect our own personal time. We need to respect our own value, and we need to set boundaries with other people, with our colleagues, with our friends, with our family, and we need to build in protected personal time. So like when you leave work, you need to log off, turn off, clock out. Like you need to have that separation of church and state between work and personal life. Now, where this quadrant can be okay to be used strategically. And again, as long as we've done our important tasks first, and then we're coming to this one, we can use it tactically as a way to build social capital. Because a lot of times these interruptions, they're going to be other people's crises coming onto us. And that gives us an opportunity to, in our free time, if we're not doing it all the time, help out these individuals and start building that social capital or collecting favors so that we have strong relationships with the people around us. But again, this is only okay if this is subordinated to our other priorities and that we're being intentional about it and we're doing it not out of a sense of obligation or skipping what we need to be doing to be taking care of ourselves in order to do this. Next, we're going into quadrant 1, and that is our crisis quadrant. And again, this one's super important, super urgent. But if we find ourselves in here all the time, that means we are being deeply reactive. You should not be having more than 1 or 2 emergencies a week, unless you have kids. If you have kids, them mother effers are sick like a third of their life. They are sick all the time. And that, like, there's no way around that. You can't proactively get your way through flu season. It just doesn't work, unfortunately. And so, but when we're spending a ton of time in crisis mode, that is when it's an indication that we need to take a tactical pause. We need to stop, because when you're in crises, usually you're addressing the symptoms. You're not addressing the underlying causes. And that's why it just constantly keeps bubbling up as this thing happens and this thing happens and this thing happens. And all of those things are actually connected to a deeper rooted issue that we need to take a pause, step back, evaluate, find out what that deeper level issue is, and figure out how we're going to address it proactively. And so this is like at work, right? Sometimes at work, like if you're constantly running around putting out fires and doing like ad hoc bucket brigade style things, all hands on deck to put out these fires, maybe it's time to realize that like we need to build a fire department. Like fires happen. We need to proactively come up with a way to address this. We need to anticipate regularly occurring problems or things that can be problematic and build in solutions to them before they happen. Again, that's the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so what can this look like? Like not caring for our personal health and our fitness, right? Like if we're having heart attacks, we're having high blood pressure, we're having diabetes, like all of this, like a lot of these things can be prevented by being proactive, by spending more time in quadrant 2, taking care of our personal health. This can also be deeper underlying problems with our products or systems. We're not doing appropriate preventative maintenance on our homes, our vehicles, or our infrastructure. Like if you're not changing your oil, if you're not fixing that leak in that roof, those problems compound into crises over time. And again, those crises, just like in last episode, they stack up into this domino effect that forces us to be reactive. If we are not budgeting enough time to complete our tasks on time, if we're not building redundancy into our systems, we're going to be spending a lot of time in this crisis mode. Now, another thing, and this is kind of a sensitive topic, but if you or someone you know is constantly in crisis mode, this can be indicative of deeper underlying psychological challenges. And I think everyone at some point has run into this kind of person where they're just like, they're constantly in crisis. There's constantly drama around them and issues with relationships because they're making it. And they're always like sick, or their kid's always sick, or they're self sabotaging all of their success, or finding ways to just constantly get in trouble. And it can be indicative of like this need for sympathy from others or a victim mentality, and can be the result of abuse or neglect within their childhood, or potentially challenging cognitive challenges. And so that's one thing we have to watch out for individuals that are constantly in this space. Now, that said, there are certain environments and certain situations where like you should be in this crisis mode all the time. And that's if you work for the fire department, you work for IT, you work for the police or EMS, like responding to crises is your full-time job. You are the fire department. You are the proactive solution to that. So like if you work in IT and your job every day, all day is fixing computers and electrical problems all the time, like that's okay because that's your job and you're supposed to be doing that. Then we get into the last quadrant. And this is where we want to be spending all of our time. Quadrant 2, the goals and planning quadrant. If you find that when you're checking off the things on your list that you are predominantly in this quadrant most of the time, then congratulations. You are doing exactly what you need to be doing. You don't need to be watching my episodes. And in fact, I should probably just have you come on and start teaching all these classes because you know it better than I do. This is where you should strive to be most of your time. This is you're working out regularly, you're taking care of your health, you're spending good time with your friends, your family, you have good social networks, you're anticipating your needs, you're being prepared and ready to take on life's challenges. And this is where you're focusing on the future and really making something of yourself. So, kind of bringing this all back around, right? So, what is the most valuable resource in the world? That's right. You guys got it. It's our time, right? And why is it the most valuable resource in the world? It is the only thing that there is nothing we can do to get more of, unless you're taking care of your health and spending a lot of time in the quadrant 2. Then you can kind of eke out a little bit more. But like our time, right? We have a finite window of time. We can't save it. We can't gift it. We can't buy it. And we have to spend it every single day. Every single day, you're given a stack of 24 hours and you have to use it somewhere. Are we spending those hours wisely? Are we putting those hours in the areas of our life that are going to get us those highest returns, that are going to help us move towards our bigger objectives? And so by understanding the important versus urgent matrix, we can use it and apply it to our schedule to understand if we're spending our time wisely, if we're investing it really where it should be, and if we're not, what we need to do to kind of take a step back, take a look at what's going on, and figure out how to readjust our priorities. So, what'd you guys think? Was that useful? Was it not? What tools do you guys use to kind of prioritize your time? And how do you know when you're really doing it well, or we're kind of slipping into distractions and doing that mental junk food as a way to cope? So anyway, to finish things off, we're going to do our quote of the day. And our quote of the day, this one needs a little bit of explaining because it comes from the show Suits. And I've quoted it before out of context and people took it the wrong way and got like really mad at me. But basically in Suits, it's about a law firm and these hotshot lawyers that are constantly doing sweet one-liners to each other. And they're the smartest, most aggressive people in the room. And so in this episode, there's this huge legal battle between our protagonist and another law firm. And everyone, it's all hands on deck. Everyone's running around like they're chickens with their heads cut off, and they are freaking out. And the protagonist, Harvey Specter, finds another senior level employee from one of their partnering law firms that's on the case with them. And his name is Edward Darby. And Edward Darby is literally just sitting back doodling. Like he's not doing everything. Everyone else is freaking out and he's just sitting there doodling. And this is like mind-blowing to Harvey. And he's just like, what is happening here? And the interaction goes something like this. And so Edward, as he's doodling, he notices Harvey and he goes, Harvey, I'm just in the middle of a little afternoon crossword. Are you a puzzler? And Harvey, who's like blown away by this, is like, don't you have work to do? And Edward looks back at him and he goes, my dear fellow, if I have to do work, then I'm not doing my job. Ugh. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. This guy freaking gets it. This guy lives in quadrant 2. This guy is all about being proactive versus reactive. Like, he knows these battles come. He knows that, like, they're going to be crazy. And so right now, what we're seeing in that moment is him enjoying the fruits of his labor of being proactive. He set up one of the best legal teams in the country. He adequately trained everyone. He did all the prep work so that when the fire came and everyone was freaking out doing their little bucket brigade to try and address it, his professional firefighters ran out and just dealt with it, and he just sat back doing a crossword puzzle. I freaking love it. My dear fellow, if I have to do any work at all, then I'm not doing my job. I love it. Anyhow, let me know what you guys think. If you have made it this far through the episode, please think about hitting that like or that subscribe button. I know it can be lame, but it's a great metric for us to know that we're doing the right things and that it's what you guys want to see. Outside of that, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Spend some time with your kids. Spend some time outside. Touch some grass. Do a hobby. Start working on that book. I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week. Cheers. We don't want to be doing this, right? So we want to, hi, Rogue. Oh, you're so pretty. You're so pretty. Did you jump into the recording? Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I forgot to lock the door. All right.